Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He is on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He's also a U.S. military veteran. Thank you, Congressman, for joining us. I want to give you a chance to listen to comments from President Trump and the Russian president on election hacking. Have a listen.
Well, I think it was Russia, and I think it could have been other people in other countries. Could have been a lot of people interfered. I said it very simply. I think it could very well have been Russia, but I think it could well have been other countries, and I won't be specific. But I think a lot of people interfere. I think it's been happening for a long time. It's been happening for many, many years.
Hackers can be anywhere. They can be in Russia, in Asia, even in America, Latin America. They can even be hackers, by the way, in the United States, who very skillfully and professionally shifted the blame, as we say, onto Russia. Could you accept that?
Does it alarm you, Congressman Kinzinger, to hear the Russian and American presidents on message, in effect, undermining the intelligence community's assessment that Russia directed this hacking?
Yeah, it's alarming. Look, I think the president got it half right. He said it's Russia. I don't understand the comments about could be other countries, could be other individuals. I'm not sure about that, but at least this is, as far as we've seen so far, that's a good start, okay? I think part of it is, President Trump, and there are some people, frankly, that are trying to delegitimize the presidency of Trump. Not most people, but some, because of this issue. I think it's not to delegitimize the presidency, but in my mind, this is about defending the institution of democracy in the United States and in our allies, because if people lose faith in their ability to cast a vote and to have that heard, that's when you see breakdowns of institution and faith, which leads to long-term problems.
Let me ask you this. You're a veteran. You served your country overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. You have many intelligence professionals doing the same thing at great risk to themselves, and yet you heard the president, again, it's not the first time today, cast doubt on the very credibility of the U.S. intelligence community. Why, and isn't that damaging?
I think it's damaging it's especially damaging to do it, and I've been just as critical of the prior administration when they did it. It is extremely damaging to try to air something like that when you're overseas. I mean, we've got to get back, and I'm desperately saying this to everybody, we've got to get back to politics ends at the water's edge. We have to present a united front. I think it's wrong for the prior administration when President Obama did it. It's wrong for President Trump to air things like what happened in Iraq in front of foreign audiences. It's wrong to do. So I think he could have a very good trip here. I think the meeting with President Putin could be good. It could lead to some things, but let's stop airing dirty laundry and let's start standing together with our intelligence professionals, because that has an impact when our allies are listening to, these are the people that share intelligence with our CIA and our DIA and everything else.
You mentioned the meeting between Trump and Putin. The Wall Street Journal today calling it Trump's Putin test and saying that the Russians, speaking of Putin, will interpret concessions as a sign of weakness. Are you concerned that President Trump will go into that room? I mean, there's talk of returning, for instance, these compounds that were taken away from Russia in the transition period in reaction to election meddling. Are you concerned that Trump will go in there and concede something and not be tough enough, in effect, on the Russian leader?
That would be my concern no matter who's president, that something like that would happen. What we've learned from Vladimir Putin and the Russians is that they will continue to take. It was similar to when we basically gave up our missile defense shield in Europe without getting anything in concession. We never got anything in concession. You have to deal with President Putin as he is. He's a strong man. He respects power. He actually respects strength. He will back down when presented a brick wall that he cannot move past anymore. I think President Trump did a very good thing with the bombing of the airfield in Syria, with firing on these regime elements in the deconfliction zones in Syria, shooting down the Su-22 despite Russia's warning. I think President Trump can go into this meeting really in the strong position. But if you walk in and you say, here's concessions, what can you give us? Vladimir Putin may not show it in his face because he's former KGB, but he'll feel it in his heart that he's got another administration he can tangle with. And I hope that's not the case. I hope he walks in with a very strong perspective on this.
There's a temptation to look at election meddling as an issue of the past, but fact is, in public testimony, you hear this from senior intelligence officials, that Russia continues to attempt to hack, probe election systems, political organizations. Are you concerned that President Trump himself is not taking the threat of further attacks on the U.S. democratic system seriously enough?
Sure, it's a concern. I know his administration is. I've talked with a lot of folks in the administration, very high up folks in the administration, who say they're taking this very seriously. We're formulating plans to counter it. Look, Vladimir Putin fears his own election and losing that more than anything, so he's playing with fire in a lot of this. I think the president needs to make stronger statements on it, though. Again, this isn't, there's all this talk about who won, who didn't win. President Trump won, and he won rightly by getting the vast majority of the electors. He's a legitimate president, and I'm glad he's there. But you look at 2018, fine, whatever happens there, 2020. I worry about not the next election. I worry about people's faith in the institution of democracy. Because as I mentioned prior, if you start losing faith that your voice is being heard, and I think a lot of people feel that way already, but if you feel that's coming, then that's when you lose faith in the institution, and that's how societies break down.
And that's an alarming prospect.